The motion to reconvene into open session and to adopt certification of closed session.
Madam Chair, I move that we reconvene in open session and adopt certification of closed session.
Second.
It has been moved and second that we reconvene in open session and adopt certification of closed session. All of those in favor, use the usual sign.
Aye.
Certification of closed session. Whereas the Dinwiddie County School Board has convened a closed session on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and whereas paragraph 2.2-3712 of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by this school board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Dinwiddie County School Board hereby certifies that, to the best of each member's knowledge, only such business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the school board. J. Sneff, District 1.
I certify.
Betty Haney, District 2. Barbara Pittman, District 3.
I certify.
Mary Benjamin, District 4.
I certify.
Shirlene Merritt, District 5.
I certify.
Madam Chair, 4 certified, 1 absent. Betty Haney, District 2.
Thank you. Now we invite you to stand to participate in the Pledge of Allegiance with Mr. J. Sneff.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Madam Chair, are there any amendments? Need a motion to adopt the agenda.
I move that we adopt the agenda as presented.
Second.
It has been moved and second that we adopt the agenda as presented. All of those in favor?
Aye.
Hearing no noes. Closed session report.
Madam Chair, I move that the personnel list be accepted as presented.
Second.
It has been moved and second that we adopt the personnel list as presented. We approve the personnel list as presented. All of those in favor, use the usual sign. Aye. Hearing no noes, the personnel list is approved. Student matters.
Madam Chair, I move that we grant the parents' request to release the following students from compulsory attendance based on religious exemption, and that would be case number 08/21-5, case number 08/21-6, case number 08/21-4, and 08/21-3.
Second.
It has moved and been second that we accept the student matters report as presented for, and it's the compulsory, what is it?
Release from compulsory attendance.
Release
Yes.
from compulsory attendance. All of those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hearing no noes, it is granted. Work session.
Yes, Ms. Benjamin, we have a couple of items tonight that we would just like to bring some information in front of you and then have the board to discuss. These are not for approval, but just for informational purposes. Dr. Gurley is going to start this evening by talking to us about what student success has looked like over the course of the past year and the opportunities that lie ahead of us.
Alrighty. Good evening again,
Good
Madam
evening.
Chair, board members, Dr. Weston. So I am going to present to you, each year we present our accreditation data. Before the start of each school year, we do a recap of what happened during the previous year. So this presentation, So our presentation, I do have a little overview for you. So what I'll do is I'll attempt to tell a little story because our situation, of course, as we know, that every school division has been affected by the pandemic, and most certainly we've not. So we want to talk about what has happened and then talk about where we're going to go from there. So just as a brief overview, we will look at our historical testing environments, just talk about what a normal year would look like. And then we will look at the school year 21 data. And then we will talk about the decreases. And then I also will just give you a snapshot of what we are planning to do in terms of continuous improvement. And then lastly, we will talk about the public release of the information. So just to set the stage for you, under a normal school year, normal circumstances, we would have students in person 5 days a week prior to our previous school years. We would have students 5 days a week. We would be building an SOL testing calendar that would support our students' learning. And when I say that, we would collaborate with our principals, and we would talk about what weeks we want to do testing and on which days and how much time we want to allot for remediation and things of that nature. And then we would, as we would go through the testing, we would then provide our students with opportunities to do remediation if they qualify for expedited retakes. And so expedited retakes are students who would qualify in the area of who would score between 375 and 399. We would provide expedited retakes to those students. And then lastly, what we would do is as grade levels and departments, we would unpack as a measure to support students with the expedited retakes. What we would do is we would look at student performance by question, and we would look at the strains that students did well and then, or did not do well, I should say, and then we would allow them to be provided with some interventions and supports in those areas. So that's what a snapshot of what a normal year would look like. So as we go into this data, what I will prepare you for is that this data is not what we would typically see for Dinwiddie County Public Schools. This data is much lower. But I will also talk to you about why this data looks a little lower. So I won't spend a lot of time on the numbers, because I think what most of the conversation should be about is what happens as we move forward. So we did look at our data by school. We have aggregated our data by school. And what you will see is that to keep in mind as we go through this is that in order to be in a school year where we would look at accreditation, to meet the benchmark, 75% would be the pass rate in the area of reading. And what you'll see for all of our schools is that we did not meet the 75% benchmark. But you have here Dinwiddie Elementary, and then you see the mathematics scores. And we'll talk about I know mathematics seems a lot lower than the other subjects, but we'll talk about why math is that low, and then we'll also discuss next steps. And then you see the science, you see the social studies and science scores. Midway Elementary is the same. Every school, all of our schools scored below the benchmark, and Midway is no different here. And they did have a glow. They did have a glow in the area of 2 glows. In the area of science and social studies. Southside the same. The mathematics score being the outlier, being the lowest score, and really being the biggest outlier. And you'll see that across our school division, and you'll see that as we look at the data across the state.
May I ask a question?
Sure. At any point, I'm sorry to say that. I should have said that.
Now, I know this was during COVID, and was a child who didn't test counted as a pass or a fail or neither or?
Mm-hmm. So we were penalized. We were penalized for students who were supposed to test but did not test. So we were penalized for those students. So if a student was uploaded, so if a parent submitted a letter and said they wanted their child to be excluded from testing, we were not. However, some parents we were not in communication with, and those families, if the child was uploaded, that child did count as a 0. And so we'll talk about that. That'll also be included in some of the discussion at the end. But that is a very good question. That is a very good point. So as people see, what caused this, the pull down of these scores, you'll see that. Sunnyside, and I think, in light of, Sunnyside did, extremely well given the conditions, while they did not meet the benchmark. But I will say, again, mathematics is their outlier, and you'll see that it'll be a lot of people's outlier. Sutherland the same. But we do see, though, in the areas of fourth and fifth grade reading, you see that they did meet the benchmark, and there are some things that contributed to that. They did have a higher participation rate for fourth and fifth grade, which is consistent with having higher scores. If the participation rate is higher, then typically the scores are higher. So that is a glow. That is a glow for them. So kudos to them as well. Dinwiddie Elementary School, the first thing you see is that there's no history and social science score. That's because the sample was too small in that area. The participation rate was low in that area. Their reading, what you'll find is that for us, reading was much higher, although we did not meet the benchmark in all areas. Reading was much higher at the schools. In the area of mathematics, most certainly is the outlier. Dinwiddie High School, same thing. Our students still performed higher in reading, although we did not meet the benchmark. Reading was much higher across the school division, much higher for the school division for us. You see their writing scores, mathematics significantly lower than the reading score, and then you see how our students perform for history and social science.
And I know, Dr. Burley, I know that we don't have the graduation piece on here. I know that we had talked about that at the board advance, but we did well in that area. But of course, all of our efforts were on the seniors, making certain that they had everything they needed to graduate.
Absolutely.
Now, these the high school ones, the reading and writing, which was 11th grade English, will they get the waiver like the
Yes. So
last year?
one thing with the high school, one thing that we should know with the high school, that there were waivers for students. So typically expedited retakes, the range is $375 to $399. For the purposes of waivers, the VDOE granted students a waiver if they scored 350 to 399. So students who were typically not in the expedited range, so if you were a little bit lower, so if you got a 366, those students did. So you may have gotten a 366 in the area of reading on the 11th grade reading test. You may have gotten a 366, but you went through remediation. That student did qualify for the credit for the locally verified credit, I should say.
But not for any of the other grade levels. It was only for the 11th graders.
That's correct.
Only for 11th grade in reading and writing?
Right,
Or
so-
what if they were in history or?
Well, yes, every student. This was the only school year that the waivers, that we did have students who qualified for the waivers. Next school year, that won't.
Right.
Well, this school year that we're in right now, going into
And that
now.
was to protect the kids that were going to be seniors next year, so they wouldn't be trying to play catch up this year.
That's correct.
Thank you.
So this is our performance as it relates to the state performance data. And this is just me. It's not a glaring difference. I just think across the state, what it shows is that students and schools were impacted heavily by COVID-19. And what you will see is that it's a lack of, having that face-to-face rich instruction, which leads me to talk about our decreases. So when we talk about our decreases, the first thing that we really should think about is that we had about 50% of our students for the bulk of the year face to face. And so we know that alone, when we have struggling learners, we don't have the opportunities to pull them and do that targeted assistance. So we were working with about 50% of our students. I looked at this number. Miss Wynn and I worked on this. This number is actually quite high for the second bullet, but we said that in most cases we had 60% or less of the students participate in our testing, and in some areas, the participation rate in the testing was about 40% of the students. And so what you see is that in some of those areas, the scores were reflective of a very small percentage of students. And so that's also, the scores aren't really a true indication of our entire student body, all of our students who were eligible to test. We did have, and we had parents did have options last school year. And so we know that our families who elected to be home, there was a virtual test, and we worked with our virtual families. There was the Virginia Remote Student Progress Test, and that was for students in grades 3 through 8. So while the SOL test, the participation was lower in that, we had students who were participating in the VRSPT. We had those students who were participating in that. They may have done well with that, but those aggregate scores were not included in the SOL test data, and those scores will not be released to the public as well. And so the fourth bullet just really talks about, when we were looking at last school year and we were working with Ms. Smith-Tucker, who is our DDOT, our Director of Testing, when we were working through that process, we were really focused on working with our students and preserving our instructional time with them. And one thing I will say is that if you've spent time in the school as it relates to testing, there's a lot of testing at the state level. The number of assessments that students have per grade level. And so we really were trying to buy back a lot of time. And so we didn't spend a lot of time with the testing and retesting because of the accreditation waive for this school year. So we did not do the expedited retakes for students. We did not do those expedited retakes. And at the secondary, so at the elementary, at the 3 through 8, we did not do that. But then we did not do it at the secondary because the waivers were afforded to our students who were passing the course, who scored within the 350 to the 399. So there were a lot of provisions available for our students. But what we know is that when you look at our historical testing data, that our students do well, and we do well recovering students through the expedited process because of the interventions that we apply to our students. And then lastly, we talked about this already. Another thing that really was a factor in this is that students who were in that 350 to 399 range, that those students, we did not assess those. We did not retest those students. So as we move forward, I just want to reassure you that we have a plan, and that most certainly if you have any questions as I go through this and exactly what does this mean, what does this look like. So when we think about what needs to happen, it's really about the acceleration of learning. No longer talking about learning loss. It's really about how do we accelerate students. And so we're doing that. You heard me talk at our previous meeting about a multi-tiered systems of support. But this is really looking at how we provide high quality instruction to our students, how we intervene with our students. We've talked about we're bringing on math supports at the secondary level to support our students where there's some pockets where we need some additional support. So we are bringing on, using our Algebra Readiness Fund, repurposing some positions. We are going to work very intentionally with our students, because we do know that math, and I should have said this up there, but the biggest reason why that math score was significantly different because the participation rate for math was low. I mean, in many cases, in some cases, you had only 20 to 30% of students take the math SOL test. And we know that what's required by the Virginia Department of Education is that 95% of our students each year must be assessed. So we were way beyond that. We didn't even meet that threshold. So we know that, but we do have a plan. So for math, we're going to make sure that we're targeting our student. We are supporting our students the same thing as we talk about math. And our tiered supports really looks at the interventions and looks at supporting the whole child and giving them exactly what they need using our assessment data and pre-assessment data and assessing students along the way. And then secondly, we just had our kickoff with the science of reading. And so for us, we want to make sure that we are accelerating our students and we are using and doing the things that research says needs to be done to support our students. We are getting teachers trained in letters, which is evidence-based. You'll see those things inside of lesson plans. When you go inside of classrooms, you'll see centers that will be based on supporting students using those evidence-based practices. And we just are going to be very thoughtful. And again, this also lends itself to our tiered systems of support because we do have our full-time PALS person, we have our facilitator, and then we have our reading interventionist who will be providing tier 3 support for the students most in need. And then lastly, just to circle back, no pun intended, we are spiraling our mathematics curriculum. And so what we do know is that instead of just giving them just dumping all of this information, we are going to break this information in chunks and give them these pieces along the way. And we make sure that they constantly see this information because there is research behind that. And so I will say, I know Ms. Hannon sent me a text message right before I came in. She's still out in the schools with the teams. They are doing some phenomenal work. I believe that what they're building, that I know the teachers will be very, very appreciative of, and they're doing these. They've created these little notebooks where students will get to do these warm-up activities and just constantly see, and it'll be their book, it'll remain, and teachers and whomever comes in the classroom to work with our students, they will know exactly what it is our students are having difficulties with. So we are very excited about our about the spiraling of the curriculum. So as a next steps, on tomorrow, Dr. Weston will be leading the first of probably many conversations, but it is a staff conversation as it relates to our SOL performance, because one thing that I don't want teachers, one thing I want them to hear from this is that they worked very hard. They did an amazing job. Many of them, teaching both virtual and face-to-face. They overcame a lot, balancing their own homes, facing the fears of COVID and the like. And so they were very resilient. If I had to use a word, they did push through. And so I just want to make sure that I do say that for the public record, that our teachers did an amazing job. And so what Dr. Weston will just be sharing with them is just our next steps and just what this all means. And then also on the 26th, which is Thursday, the school quality profile, and this is the website that houses our data as it relates to accreditation, and not just SOL data, graduation, graduation rate, teacher licensure, things of the such. All that website will be updated on Thursday, so this will become public information on Thursday. So we did want to make sure that we did give our community members an opportunity to hear this information. You may hear questions about this, and it was an atypical year, and I will say that it probably wasn't fair because what we see is not an assessment of 100% of our students. It's an assessment of a small pocket of students, and that small pocket of students tried their very best, but they faced some obstacles as well as it relates to there was some. One time we were in school, we weren't, and the continuity just wasn't there. So we do have a very strong plan, and it begins with 5 days of face-to-face instruction. And then we have the right people sitting in the seats to teach our students. And then when our students don't get it, we also have the supports to provide interventions to support those students. Are there any questions? I know it's a lot, and it's a lot to process when you see those numbers, but there's so many variables. I started to come up here today and talk about independent and dependent variables because there's just so many things that really contributed to these outcomes.
And I think that what I hope the board heard is that, we had a long conversation about this. I will say that the superintendents from Region 1, we wrote a letter to Dr. Lane to let him know that about, questioning why the release of this information, because it's certainly across the state, you're going to see that, there's not a school district that doesn't look like this, what our results look like. And we just were really questioning, right now where the morale is high and everybody's looking forward to coming back, would this be the right thing to be pushing information out? And is it really going to deflate some of that, that we've really been working hard over the summer? And the response we got that it was a federal requirement, that there were no more waivers from the federal level, and that although they were waiving the accreditation part, that they were not going to waive the information to be pushed out to the public. And we just felt like it was really important. I know we shared it with you all as a board at the advance, and we just felt like that we want to be very transparent with the families that we serve. But this is certainly, as Dr. Gurley said, it's certainly, it is a number. And it gives us one piece of information that will be coupled with lots of other pieces of information. And it gives us a lot of opportunities to grow in the year ahead. And I have no doubt that we have the right people in place to do this work. We were already on track doing the work prior to this, and we will be right back there. Come next year this time, you're going to see, it's going to be quite amazing to see the growth in our young people. And I will think, under these most extenuating circumstances, our young people, our teachers, our principals, our directors have really thrived, considering what they've had to endure the past 18 months. And so that's what I want my message to be tomorrow to them. I want them to hear from me. It's just a number. It's a number. And it is a number. It's part of our story, and we're going to use it as just, just to move forward. And we're, and we're just going to move forward from it. And, but it in no way is any indication of the quality of the people that we have working here, because we have amazing, amazing staff, and they've shown themselves. And I will say we were very intentional in the past 18 months to say what was most important to us was about taking care of people. Mm-hmm. That we could get to the other part when we get kids back in school, but when people, are trying to figure out how am I going to get fed, and I don't have a job, and those things have got to be taken care of first, and those are the things we tried to take care of, is that is people in the last 18 months, and I think did a really great job with that, and we'll take care of this part of it in the year ahead.
Well, I think something that it absolutely proved, which we already knew, was that teachers and face-to-face learning is the biggest indicator here. And we had to do virtual because of the virus. But obviously these scores are proofs in the pudding that we need kids in the classroom. And it's face-to-face as much as possible.
Absolutely.
Well, last year being a most difficult year, as Dr. Gurley has stated, I think that our teachers did an amazing job, along with support staff and other people who worked with them. And as Ms. Pittman has just said, we know face-to-face learning 5 days a week is best. But in a case like this, we did what we could with what we could, and we did the best we could, and this is what we have. And this year, prayerfully, we'll have uninterrupted years that we'll all try to stay safe, and we can go 5 days a week continuously, and we can kind of build up on some of the things that we lost last last year. And I'm looking forward to doing it and doing the hard work and working with you. So we're going to continue and we're going to move on up.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or statements for Dr. Curley? Okay, you want to do another one? You moving
So,
on?
yeah, so the next part is, Dr. Gurley, we started the conversation previously there, we've had a lot of conversation around this. You know, consistent with our federal and Virginia law, I mean, we are charged with making certain that we have an educational environment here that's safe and welcoming, and free from discrimination and harassment for all students. As you know, most recently, the Virginia Code has said that we need to have a policy for transgender students and has really clearly said to us as a school system, here's what has to be in it. And there are 8 things that it said needs to be in there, and they use the word and, not the word or. And then in the second statement there says each school board shall adopt policies that are consistent with or may be more comprehensive than the model policy that's developed by the Department of Education, which they put out a very long document, which we provided with you as well. So we've been really grappling with, you know, what's the right path forward for our school system. And so what Dr. Gurley is going to bring to you today, a draft of where we are relative to regulations. And today is just about a conversation, not about a vote, because we still are gathering information from families as well as from board members as to direction along these lines. So Dr. Gurley, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes. Dr. Weston is exactly correct. So Virginia Code 22.1 through 23.3 does say that we must adopt a policy. And so the policy should include, and so I did read the model policy. I mean, I read the policy from the attorney last board meeting, but it should include things as it relates to bullying and discrimination, gender identity, privacy, student identification, dress code, access to facilities, and overnight trips and professional development. So that was the policy. So what I am going to go through with you is what that looks like in practice. And so one thing that I will say is that the benefit of having a forum such as this is that we do get to talk aloud and talk about what is in the best interest of all students. And so hopefully we will be able to use this this working moment that I can annotate as we go along and gather some of your ideas so that when we reconvene in the month of September, that it's something that, you know, whether you feel like you can approve or, you know, if you totally decide to go a different way, that's at the pleasure of the board. So I will begin by stating that I just think that it's always good to have this opening statement, some type of statement so that people understand what it is that we value. And so we are saying that Dinwiddie County Public Schools creates a learning environment that is safe and conducive for all students. And to that end, these regulations have been created to support safe environments and support the developmental needs of its students. And while these regulations are intended to support transgender students, because we know that that's what the code says, ultimately, it will ensure that all students in our schools are safe developmentally and physically in all facets of the schools. So this regulation really rests heavily on us having a student success meeting. And so this, and just as a quick overview, what a student success meeting is, this is not new for transgender students. This is something that all principals, you know, kind of oversee in their buildings when it comes to anything in their building as it relates to academics, as it relates to behavior. Sometimes our families need some things and we just convene a team of people, and it's not always the same people. Sometimes it's a school social worker and the teachers. Sometimes we bring in people from the community, teachers and parents. So the concept of student success meetings, that's not this is not new to us. So what we are saying is that when school personnel are made aware of that a student identifies as transgender, a student success team meeting should be held with the student and the family of that transgender student. And so at a minimum, we are asking that a school counselor, the school social worker, the principal or the principal's designee, and the parent be involved in that meeting. In addition to providing we also want to make sure that parents are aware of the policy, and we will provide them a copy of the policy. And so I think that this really sets the stage for our families to let them know what the rights of our transgender students are. But also having this cross-functional team allows us to have different types of resources at the table, particularly our school social worker, because they are connected to so many resources, whether it be mental health resources, and also our principal, because the principal is responsible for ensuring the safety in the building. So this is what the student success meeting should include. We're saying that all information at this meeting will remain confidential. And so as we go through these letters, you'll see that these letters meet the thresholds also of the policy, where we saw that the policy says bullying and all of those other things. So we will keep the students' records confidential. And when I go through this, if you have a question, feel free to stop me, please. The next part is that we will explore wraparound services as needed. And when we talk about wraparound services, this means that are there some other services within the community that we should be connecting our students with, whether it be mental health, families with counseling, and things of that nature. Because sometimes there are some mitigating factors that we are trying to support our families. And then it goes on to say that students will, because of the policy, students will be permitted to be called by their preferred or chosen name as well as the preferred pronoun. And students we will place the preferred name into the student information system. But when you look at D, this D kind of tells us what we can do in terms of the legalities. So all documents that are official documents must reflect the student's legal name. And so again, if John was born a female and John's birth name, legal name is Barbara, then that's what the official document will reflect Barbara Jones. But if there has been some legal change, then we can do that. But all legal documents must have the child's legal name. We can change the child's name after we've had some verification that it has been legally changed. And then it talks about what documents we can do that. We can use to change the child's name. We will. It does say inside of the policy and in the code that if a student graduates and has had a name change, they can petition us and we can go back and make a change to and reissue. For instance, we can reissue transcripts and diplomas. Letter E says in the policy it talks about the code. It talks about dress code. And we will just address the dress code through the student code of conduct. And I think that our code of conduct meets that standard now. And so we will continue to do that. Letter F talks about extracurricular activities. Well, the biggest thing right now is that we cannot create anything that supersedes the Virginia High School League. So if Virginia High School Leagues does not allow, if they don't allow transgender students to participate in a VHSL endorsed activity, then we cannot create a policy that says that they can. So that sports and all other activities that are VHSL sponsored, those things are sanctioned by VHSL. Letter G. Letter G talks about the access to facilities. And I know, and before I mention this one, I know that this one is probably the hardest one for people. And most certainly, I do to some degrees understand why. But what I want to say before I go over this one is that many of the concerns that we've had, when people have called in and have had some worries about this, is about students going into restrooms when you were born a female, you were born a male, but now you identify as a male, and they worry about safety. Those families worry about safety. And I just believe strongly that this regulation will protect students, and that without a doubt in my mind that it will protect students. And it's because we have some procedures. We know who our students are. We can prevent those instances where someone who is born a male just wakes up one day and says, I want to walk into a female's restroom. We can prevent those types of things because we know which students that we are working with. And so when it comes to letter G, it says the student success team shall develop a plan if a student requires access to facilities such as a locker room and restroom. And it says shall because this is not optional. When we are talking about students who identify as transgender, this regulation that we're proposing is not optional. The only way that we can keep all students safe is if we have a plan. And so what we plan to do is we will provide for, the following will be provided for consideration based on students' developmental and physical needs. Single stalled restrooms. Many of our buildings do have single stalled restrooms that are only one person can go in. We do have that. We do have access to the nurses station. But then there is the option, which in the Virginia Code says that we are required to provide as an option. So this isn't Dinwiddie County Public Schools saying, well, this is what the code says. We have to provide the option for same-sex segregated restrooms. And so I know that that's the heartburn. We recognize that is the heartburn for families and people within the community. I just believe that this regulation controls who goes in and out of restrooms. We've had instances before we had regulations, which we don't have right now, but before we had procedures, we have had students and currently have students who have identified as transgender since I've been here without our knowing, using the restroom, and the students knew, and they were going into the stalls because even in the males' restrooms, the students use stalls. As a school-based administrator, as I go in to make sure that the students are safe, I go into the male's restroom, and then the female teacher goes in the female. But when I go in the male's restroom, many of our young men are in stalls. They're not at the urinal. And so we've had students who've identified as transgendered males who have been going into the same-sex segregated restrooms, but they were going into the stalls like their peers. So it may be, unsettling for some people, but it was happening before we knew it was happening. And when we found out it was happening, we had to respond appropriately. And I will say that in most cases, those students, once we had a conversation, they've either elected to use the single stall with no other students, or they've elected to go to the nurses station and not to the segregated with their peers. But, there may be the day, and I think that that's why we are talking about what the next step looks like in all of this. And then lastly, it talks about overnight. It talks about the overnight stays. And so the principal, and there's a typo on this. Sorry. The principal we will talk about, so as a part of the plan, what happens if the student participates in an activity that requires an overnight stay. And we've been very good about this anyway. I think I mentioned at the last meeting, though, that's one thing that you all always are really good at it. What does the overnight stay look like? How many chaperones? And so just working through a plan. So what I would expect to see is a very detailed plan to support the needs of students. But I do know that there are some parts of this that are very hard for people to hear. And we are, one, responding to the Virginia Code, but ultimately, as a board, you all, it's your pleasure what the outcome of this document looks like. And I am willing to do whatever you like because I work and we work for you.
I would like to say that, to back up the fact that we've always worked with the students, and we've had this, worked with students who are transgender or not transgender, and we've been doing it well with the success teams and finding solutions and finding, and supporting students and giving them a safe place. What we have to remember with this document is that it does apply to all students, meaning that, yes, a transgender student can ask the success team about accommodations, but what we have to remember is then other students who may be in the building who are not transgender can ask the same. So what we will probably end up with is someone who feels the need not to be in the same-sex segregated restroom if it ever occurs, asking to use the single-sexed gender-neutral bathroom with the single door, or asking to have the pass to use the nurse's station. So in other words, when we say all, then it means everybody can have that request. So, and to me, it's a little unsettling that the federal and the state give us this document and say you must pass it, and yet it is state and federal law. But so now our charge is to figure out how to serve everybody, that student and everybody else. And that's the beauty of our policy, is that we already had in place options for kids. And we've had options for kids since the cows came home, with a child who didn't want to change clothes in the locker room for whatever reason. Not as well developed as all the other kids. We gave them a place to change that was different. We've had people that needed a different place because they were bullied. We've had people that were just shy, and we accommodate them, and we're going to continue to accommodate everybody who falls under the spectrum and those who do not fall under the spectrum. And so I think that's what we have to do to be fair to everybody, and I have confidence that we will.
And I agree with Ms. Pittman. It's a shame that we have to label this as a transgender regulation when it should be just a student regulation. Like I said, all kids are entitled to the same, main things. We want to be safe and come to school and learn. That's our number one job.
Yeah.
So, that's I agree. It's a shame that the state and federal government's making this point out a certain population when it should be just all students in general.
To your point, Mr. Schnepp, it doesn't have to be a standalone. And that's another thing we did talk about. We could incorporate each facet of it into the existing policies. For example, H, we could incorporate that into field trips because that's about overnight stays and all. G, we could just pick out the different policies that it goes with and we can incorporate it. So it's not a standalone, and they all fall under the discrimination policy, but it has all of these parts in it and would still satisfy the state and the federal regulations.
I think that'd be a great idea. We could look into that.
We can
'cause
show
that's
you
something
both ways and see, yeah, we can
Yep.
show you both ways.
to show
Okay.
them, you know, because we do care about all students.
Well, we did
not-
talk about that because there are lots of, groups of kids that we want to make sure that we don't miss anybody.
So I have a question for number I, for letter I, I'm sorry. What is the process or arrangement that we have?
She's got a different,
We already
she's got
have-
the first version.
That we already have in order for, in place for someone who's transgender for overnight stay?
And so I think it's, from what I could gather, it's just been case by case. Many of the overnight stays, there are two students in a room. And so, one thing that we talked about is that sometimes, if it's the comfort level of the student, either way, maybe the non-transgender student doesn't feel comfortable sharing a room, then we would accommodate the student. So I think from what I gathered, that's been the bulk. And I don't think we've had a lot of it. When I did my research, we haven't had a lot of it. But I know when I talked out loud about it with various groups through our division, I mean, that would be something that we could consider when we did a student success meeting.
We've had male-female issues on overnight trips, and we had to juggle for that, like a female wrestler or a female football player.
Yeah.
So we've already had to do it for a different reason. And it was always worked out and to everyone's agreement.
Well, I just commend you all for what you're putting in place now because, and I hope my daughter isn't listening, but we had a similar situation when she was in college. And there was nothing in place like this. And of course, I called Student Affairs to suggest that they do something like this because you all have said we're all are one. Our students, they need to be respected regardless. And I just commend you all for what you're doing.
Dr. Gurley, I'd like to say that I commend you for the group or the committee for working on this because we are in the business of educating students and giving students a pleasant experience. All students. I shouldn't have to come to school and feel different from anybody else when I enter the door. I should feel happy to go to my classes and feel good about my school. And I think this for all the students will take care of that, will make them feel happy, and we can do what we're called to do is to educate the students.
Yes, I definitely, I left that part out. I think the students should be educated on this piece, and they need to understand it, respect each other, and move on. As a matter of fact, my daughter ended up being best friends with that individual, because of things that took place.
Are there any other questions for Dr. Gurley?
So what I heard is, so for next month, when we meet on the first board meeting for consideration, is that we unpack so we're gonna unpack the regular,
Yeah, what I'm thinking is.
Well, we're
we have
gonna
a
unpack
standalone policy, the policy is the policy, you can't, but then the regulations then maybe would be embedded in, or I think we can work through that, to see what it would look like attached to already standing policies. We already have a discrimination policy that protects that, where gender identity is already inside of that's been longstanding. But maybe these regulations then are now, that, how at the bottom where Ms. Golston references all the different the policies that are attached to this one, I think we can unpack these regulations, and instead of having a standalone regulations, they would be inside. But I think for working purposes, because I know one of the things that we wanted to try to make it easy for is for schools when they have to do the student success team, maybe that could be like a one-pager to say, this is how you conduct the student success team.
well, and that's what I was thinking, that
But
we
for
can,
policy, we would unpack
we can
it.
unpack the letters, but then we would just essentially make this the template for the student success
Correct.
meeting when we're dealing with these types of issues. So
That way it's consistent from school to school. You know, I will say, and thank you, Dr. Gurley, for all this. It's really, you know, I think that we have been working with students in this situation. And I will tell you that there are two things that really are on their hearts. And that is really they want to be called the name that they prefer and they want to be called the pronoun. Generally, all the other stuff is not something that they're as interested in. I also will say that, you know, I think our schools, the way our schools are set up, haven't really evolved with time because I just remember being in gym and I dreaded going to gym. Dreaded. Before your time, Dr. Gurley. When you just have to wear those things, you had to zip up, and I did not want to, like, I was so uncomfortable. And I think we haven't really thought about locker rooms and privacy. And I just think I love the idea when Mr. Davis said, as we're redoing these restrooms in these schools, like thinking about that out loud, like how can we provide spaces of privacy just for kids? I mean, just, you know, we don't all need to be in the bathrooms. And maybe we don't have to watch bathrooms anymore like we do. And so, you know, so thinking about how can locker rooms be different and how can bathrooms be different just to afford people an opportunity, you know.
You know, to redesign restrooms, it would be the easiest way to go. It just costs a lot of money.
Yeah, but as we're redoing schools.
If we're renovating a school, we need to think about that. Have more single bathrooms.
Single
And it's not a
Wouldn't
group.
we all love to have their own bathroom?
Yes.
Yes. I thank you for your work with this, Dr. Gurley. I know it's really been difficult to try to navigate through all of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gurley. And we have board matters.
So we do have a few things, Ms. Benjamin, that we do need to vote on during this work session. Dr. Gurley is not leaving because he is the next thing. He does need to talk to us about attendance and some changes to attendance as it's related to COVID and quarantines and things like that as we move to this new school year.
yes.
Dr. Gurley, you're on.
All right, and this is really quick. So the bulk of this, about 90% of this, 85 to 90% of this is the current policy. I have highlighted in yellow an area that we need to update, and so I guess I want to just start by saying that as a result of having a virtual option for students. We are required to ensure we have accountability measures for how we take attendance and we report what a school day looks like, specifically as it relates to virtual instruction. So in that first highlighted area, the only updated information that we have here is that quarantines will be considered and excuse absences. So we will accept we will count that as an excuse absence. So that is an acceptable excuse. So number 5 has been updated. The next 2 pages are the same, but when we get down to attendance reporting, the language here is just a little bit different now. And so it just says the recording of attendance records of student attendance are maintained in our student information system. And we do have an approved one. And so we must report all absences, tardies, etc. Moving down, this is where that new language from the recent superintendent's memo where it talks about state board regulations governing student accounting records. So it says a teaching day is defined as a day in which school is in regular or virtual session for instruction. A student shall be counted present for in-person only when he or she is present for roll call or attendance is approved for participation in the school-sponsored field trips, activities, etc. A student reporting after roll call will be recorded present or tardy, and that's based on the regulations in school. The next part is the part that is required to address the threshold for virtual instruction. A student shall be counted present during virtual instruction on when he or she fulfills the definition of meaningful interaction. So that's our new language for this school year. When we talk about virtual instruction, we must talk about, has the student had meaningful interactions? And so the definition of a meaningful interaction is any task or interaction that promotes positive student engagement and learning that can be electronically documented to represent a student's attendance and participation. And I know that that became one of the really big things last school year, and we didn't have anything in place. So as we go back down this road, hopefully, we stay healthy, wealthy, and wise, and so we don't have to do any closing. But in the event that we do have some students who will be participating virtually, this shows us that it must be something that can be documented electronically, is the key word. It also talks about two-way interactions between a student and teacher that allows feedback and input on successes, challenges, and can be electronically documented to promote student engagement. But it also says that this contact can be done during school hours or after school hours. I just want to make sure I say that out loud before you vote on it, because that is one thing that is a little different when it comes to attendance, is that this does not have to be traditional school hours, because some of these programs, some programs are asynchronous. There's some asynchronous days. I know, like with Virtual Virginia, there's an asynchronous day. So the key here is that the school day can also be after school hours, as long as you can document, as long as it can be documented electronically. And so we just also provided some other examples of what meaningful contact is, and it can be conferencing with teacher, participation in emails with the teacher, class webinars, discussion boards. And so these are just some examples and are not all inclusive. So these were the updates in yellow, and really the only update on the front was we added a quarantine. If a student has to quarantine from school, that is considered an excused absence. But the rest of the policy is the policy that we already had, with the exception of where we added the regulations governing accounting records. Are there any questions or any like why we have to do that?
Dr. Girl, this is to make the attendance, to make it better, accountability.
Yes, ma'am. And I know Miss Massengill and I talked today, and I know that was one of the really big things last year that we spent a lot of time on, because remember, Wednesdays, we had students who were coming to us 4 days a week, but then on Wednesdays, they weren't with us. And so we really struggle with, well, how do we know the student is present? What are we counting the student present for? And so this gives us some definition of what a meaningful interaction is as it relates to students who participate virtually. Because we may have some students who have to go out on quarantines and still want to be counted present and things of that nature.
Okay.
But it does require a vote.
Are there any other questions for Dr. Gurley on this student attendance policy?
Now, does our system allow us to have someone who is in supervision of these children to check on it or follow up or fix it? Because in a lot of times, the child fails to click it, and we really want credit for them being engaged. So. Absolutely. So our students who are enrolled in what we are referring to as cohort 1 of virtual instruction, those are our students in virtual. Those are the students in Virtual Virginia. They are assigned a mentor, and those mentors. So Virtual Virginia is required to take attendance. And so Ms. Gibbs and Mr. Weaver are the mentors at the secondary, so I'll use that as an example. They will have the ability to go in and check the child's attendance to see if they've been actively engaged. And in the event that the student is not actively engaged, they can hold a student success meeting.
they can get the parent involved, and that student success meeting will look more like an attendance conference where we can talk about whether this is still an appropriate platform or an appropriate mode of instruction for the student.
And-
The importance of this, of course, is, well, number one, for student engagement, but number two, attendance is part of our accreditation.
Absolutely.
And, you know, we want to make sure students are engaged, but get credit for being engaged.
And how will they do this check-in daily?
Yes. So the Virtual Virginia teachers will take the attendance, and we can go in and just based on, they can differentiate their support. So if it's a student they see is attending regularly, they can check the attendance every other day. If it's a student who is showing a pattern of some behavior, they may want to provide a more intensive level of support and do some more frequent check-ins.
And that information is always there, whether they check in or not. We can always
Yes, ma'am.
find out if they
Yes, ma'am.
It
Yes,
doesn't
ma'am.
drop it or anything.
Yes, ma'am.
Are there any other questions?
I'd make a motion that we accept this into our policy.
Second.
It has been moved in second that we accept the student attendance policy as presented. We're ready for question. All those in favor, use the usual sign. Aye. Hearing no nays. Thank you, Dr. Gurley.
Thank you, Dr. Gurley.
Get a break.
And as the board requested last month, you wanted to, every time we came together, to receive an update relative to our health and safety plan, and I'm going to ask Ms. Powell and Ms. Clark to come forward. I will tell you, we're still monitoring the data that's out there. Virginia Department of Health has now put out data. It doesn't match the CDC data. Virginia Department of Health today has us at 13.2% positivity, but CDC has us as 18% positivity. It says that 1 in 12 people have contracted the virus here in Dinwiddie County, but right now it looks like about 10 new cases every single day. Where the highest case was back in January 2021. So, Ms. Powell, we need to get you a little step stool. We need to get Ms. Powell a little step stool. Oh, it's so cute. We have one for the kids. Ms. Powell's like, please don't do that.
So one of the things that we updated in the health plan was change of wording instead of no visitors, limited visitors. Also, we are encouraging groups who have been approved to use our facilities or our schools that they have to adhere to the same mask requirements that we adhere to with the schools. Schools will still have site-based substitutes to definitely help with teacher absences, and we are going to continue with virtual eligibility meetings on Wednesdays. Parents seem to really appreciate this, and it cuts down on the close contact of meetings, so that's a big help as well.
All right, so another piece that we have been monitoring, it seems like daily, has been any updates to the latest public health order that was issued on August 12th. And so it actually has had multiple FAQs that have come about since then, even some newest ones yesterday. And I have provided you a copy of those as well. But we wanted to point out just a few things because we have been quite busy since the 12th working through this because we've had a lot of questions from parents and families. So once again, that this public health order reinforces current state law. That was Senate Bill 1303 that was signed by the governor on March 31st. That requires Virginia schools to adhere to mitigation strategies outlined by the CDC. And then as of July 28th, CDC guidelines did change to include universal masking for all students, teachers, and staff. So I still need to point out, because there's still a lot of questions around this. So this is the public health order, which is completely separate from the federal mask mandate that applies to public transportation. So we are working through two separate things, and that's where a lot of confusion sometimes comes in. So some questions that we're highlighting, because some of these do apply to us.
Does the order apply during nap time at school? So this mainly, nap time would pretty much be our pre-K students. But when students have nap time, no, certainly they would not have to wear the mask. And then, of course, other things would include during exercise, when children are eating, things like that. Things we already had in our plan. Does the order apply to all activities on the grounds of schools? Yes, it does. So just like Ms. Powell just mentioned, for people that want to use our facilities, they still have to maintain the same requirements that we are maintaining. And it doesn't matter whether it's before, during, or after school, those things still apply. Does it apply to spectators at athletic events on school grounds? So it does apply to athletic events on school grounds. So this time of the year, we will have volleyball. So it would apply at a volleyball game. But anything outdoors, like at the football game, it's not the same. So outdoors is exempted from that. Now, they do still recommend, but not require, in crowded spaces that people wear the mask. So, okay, so the next part, I'm going to change gears a little bit. So questions regarding exemptions, and these are the very questions we're getting every single day. Are there religious exemptions in the order? Yes. The order includes an exemption for participation in religious rituals and religious accommodation requests should be made directly to the school division. The Department of Health is concerned with protecting the health of students and staff during in-person instruction, and local school districts are in the best position to determine what sort of accommodation may be made for religious exemptions to the masking requirement. So one of the things that's in your packet that we are bringing before you tonight is we have two different ones. So this has to do with a religious exemption, then we're going to talk about another one in a minute. So there is a form, there's a one-page document for religious accommodation request. So this is for families that may request an accommodation, and it has to be related to any religious ritual for their family. So it asks specific questions. You have to outline it. What accommodation are you requesting? And then that would come before the school. It will be turned into Ms. Powell's office in student services, and it will work through that process. And it would have to go through an approval. Okay, so just because someone writes a letter doesn't mean it's automatically granted. So we are requesting this form. So that's for your consideration tonight as well. Okay, how does an individual request an accommodation for a medical or religious reason? So now the medical piece. The process for asking for a reasonable accommodation to the masking requirement is determined by each school district. Reasonable accommodations can include different options, such as virtual instruction, possible use of face shields, increased distancing between students. These are just some examples that have been provided to us. So we have created a separate document for a medical accommodation request that would need to be completed by a physician. So a licensed physician would have to document what disability or medical concern for that student and sign off on that. So we have been in a lot of consultation with the school board attorney over what is appropriate, not appropriate, what are reasonable accommodations, things like that. We're not alone in this. Many school divisions are doing the exact same thing. You will see a lot of the forms look very similar in nature. So we have those two forms as well. So we do have those tonight. So we will incorporate that into our plan. So that would be in that section where we had about the face masks and PPE and things like that. We would have to add this into our plan as well. And we just continue to monitor. We know families have a lot of questions. And, you know, they've been very patient. The ones we have talked with that have called in, they're very understanding. And, you know, it's been, please be patient. We're working through this. It seems like we learn something new every day. Mm-hmm. But we do have these two things for you to consider, because to have these forms, you have to approve us to use these forms. If you as a school division want us to accept these type of forms, we would have to proceed with that. So the religious form and the medical accommodation form would come to Ms. Powell. And we have also been in consultation with Dr. Joyner, she's still here, because part of that medical piece, if someone has a disability, we want to make sure that we are providing appropriate accommodations, and Dr. Joyner's department is prepared in exceptional ed, whether it's through an IEP or 504, along those lines for accommodations, they're prepared to lean into that and help us with that. So if you have any questions, we'll be happy to try to answer them. Like Dr. Weston said earlier, we monitor the numbers. We're looking every day. And I don't know why the numbers are varying. We had a VDH call last Thursday with the region, and they came on the call and told us our percent was 10.3. Well, when I looked on the website, it said we were a different number. When I looked for that day on the VDH site, it had us at an 8 point. I wrote it on Post-it because they were all so different. And then the CDC had us at 19.7. So it was more than 10% difference in that. So it changes daily. Yeah.
I know, did you want to ask a question about that? I just want to make a comment about the mask and about the limited visitors. We really are very anxious to get back to school. We want, school to be better than normal. Our new normal is what we're working on. And so while I understand and do respect the fact that, there are different beliefs and conditions where they prohibit even adults from wearing masks, we are still going to try to hold our open houses, our back to school nights as scheduled. And I want to be able to assure our teachers that we work in a community that cares about people, and that, so that we can have that, we are going to ask the people that do participate in that, we will have masks available if they can, just for this limited time when they're coming in to meet the teacher, making certain that we can protect the teachers and the other students in the classroom, so that we can continue to open our doors to limited, especially to parents. I want to be able to continue to do that. If that does become a problem, we might have to, pull back on that. But we do want parents to start coming back into our schools, but we also need to keep our teachers and our young people safe in doing so. I'm sorry, Ms. Pittman, were you going to say something?
No, I was just looking at the religious exemption form, and so it just requires that the parents give us some reasoning and the parent signature. It's not asking for anyone else to sign.
No, because so something else we have to note on this one. So the
I was
religious
trying to make sure all the
accommodation.
preachers were off the hook.
Yes.
Yes. So, no, we don't, we're only requesting, so this is just stating you have to describe what accommodation you're requesting.
Right.
Okay? Because this is about an accommodation for your child to participate in whatever ritual you are saying that it is in your belief. That why they should not wear that mask.
Okay.
So that's what this is describing. So do you need a mask break? Do you need, whatever accommodation you're requesting, it needs to be here. And then if you want to provide any additional information there. Now, so the religious accommodation for the face mask can only apply to the public health order for the state of Virginia.
Not to the bus.
Not to the bus. The only exemption that we have found for anything related to transportation has been a documented from a physician.
Yes.
So if you, like, for example, riding a bus is like riding the plane, getting on the plane.
Right.
You don't fly on the plane without the mask. And the only thing we could find anywhere was a form. It was this, it was quite an extensive form.
Right.
For the airlines to allow you to not have to wear the mask.
But the medical accommodation here, if it's approved, it will cover the
The
bus as
medical
well.
can cover both for inside the building.
Okay.
And if you have the medical signature, that can cover the bus.
Correct.
It can?
It can.
It can.
It can.
The
but not
medical
religious.
can, yes. The religious does not.
What happened to being the same as an airplane? You can't get on an airplane without.
With a medical,
With a
with
medical
medical
can.
documentation, you
Not
can.
religious.
Right. That's at this moment in time.
Yeah.
That's what I was gonna say.
That could be-
Just like the data
yes.
changes, the form Ms. Clark referenced was done August 17th and then updated again August 23rd, so it could change.
So that's at this moment in time.
Until the ink dries.
Right. We're used to that. We will
Do everything
rewrite.
in pencil.
Yeah, we rewrite, tear it up, do it again.
Are there any other questions for Ms. Clark or Ms. Powell?
So, number 3, to protect others from transmission of requiring my child to wear a face shield, requiring my child to use a protective barrier around their desk. You provide all of that.
Like these.
We have it. Yeah, like this. We have plenty of that.
So those are just some more examples of some accommodations.
So it doesn't
And that would be-
necessarily mean there's no mask.
Right.
It means that the mask might be not the mitigation
Right.
strategy we use another one
And you work all that out with the parent.
with the parent.
Well, actually, these forms make it a little bit easier for you. So when the parent come in, you kind of have a more an idea of what they are, the parents are requesting. And I think this is a good form because this way you won't have to go scatterbrain when they come in. You can have the paperwork there, make the appointment, and it seems
I know they come to
There you
Ms.
go.
Powell's office, but you have 2 or 3 people that help you make these decisions. I don't want it to rest on her shoulders alone.
I'll solicit help.
Yeah, there'll be a team that will
We
help
tag
with that.
A lot.
Yeah, it'll be a
Safety in
committee.
numbers.
Ms. Powell, I'm thinking the students are going to be so happy to come back to school that you'll be limited.
Maybe so.
I hope so.
Are there any other questions?
We need to vote
Yeah,
on
I'd
this.
like you to vote on that, to put that as part of a health and safety plan.
I make a motion that we accept these forms as presented to be a part of our health and safety plan.
Second.
It has been moved and second that we accept these forms to be a part of our health and safety plan. All of those in favor use the usual voting sign, aye. Aye. Hearing no nays, it's approved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Along those lines, I'm going to ask Ms. Branch to come forward. We've been meeting to talk about, excuse me, emergency leave and, what happens when staff have to be quarantined. We're trying to learn some lessons from some of our neighbors. And so she's got some proposals for you this evening.
Good evening. As Mrs. Clark mentioned just a couple of seconds ago, this is certainly a season in which we are constantly pivoting in response to the needs of our employees and our stakeholders in relation to COVID-19. And, we were anticipating starting the school year. We hoped without COVID-19 being too much of a barrier. But as we approach closer into the school year, we do realize that there may be a need to re-implement the emergency leave regulations that we previously had earlier in the school year. But we would like to make some modifications to it, and I'd like to be able to go through those with you briefly. In the initial regulations that we provided, we had asked that we be able to provide employees up to 2 weeks of paid leave for any exposures or quarantines that were connected to their work associated with Dinwiddie County Public Schools. And then we had also covered leave for individuals that may have had cases that were not associated with Dinwiddie County Public Schools. But as far as what we would like to update and have your approval on today is to just provide the leave for those instances, quarantines, exposures that are a result of contact tracing here at Dinwiddie County Public Schools. And we would like those regulations to be effective tomorrow, August 25th, through the end of the first quarter, which would be November 1st, 2021. One of the areas I would like to highlight that is also different in the revised regulations is that we had previously allowed telework to be an option in lieu of the quarantine last school year. After being able to review, how that worked out for us overall, I do, think that it is in our best interest to remove the telework option just so that we can be able to manage the work that needs to be done. And primarily because the majority of our students will be in the schools in person, and so many of our positions, the job requirements are functions that would require them to be in person to be able to fulfill those roles. So this, would basically just allow a person, if they are subject to needing to be quarantined because of something associated here at work, then they would have that leave time to do so. We will also give the administrators an option in Frontline to be able to select emergency leave that previously wasn't an option before, but we'd like to be able to do that to make it easier on them when those cases arise. So I will turn it over to you in the event that you do have any questions.
So go back to the emergency leave that, so that if the person is exposed at COVID with us, it can be contact traced back to school.
Yes, ma'am.
They won't be using their own leave. It will be,
Correct. So up to 10 days would be provided through us.
okay, but how does that explain the emergency leave piece?
Well, that's the name of the regulation that we
Okay.
used previously was an emergency leave. In this case, the emergency is COVID-19, but I believe the name was chosen so that in the event emergency leave needs to be reinstituted again for a different situation, a different crisis, then, we can modify the regulations based on that.
Well, don't they already have,
Not anymore.
okay, so
There's not-
that's not a category that's already called emergency.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you're talking about the policy.
So can you go ahead and re-ask your question?
We have family leave, or we have sick leave, and but don't teachers have a category that's already called emergency leave where they get two days a year? I didn't
They
want
have
two to be-
personal leave.
It's personal, okay.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, so through December 31st, 2020, there was initially the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, and that was mandated by the government that we provide the leave to employees. But then when that expired, we came to the board and asked you to institute a localized leave here for the employees. That was from January through February 28th. So, of course, considering the fact that we are seeing an uptick in the cases within the community, depending on which number you look at. But we still think it's in our best interest to reinstitute a form of the regulations again, just to add a additional layer of protection for our employees. For example, we've had over 50 new teachers to start with us just on Monday. And, I would hate for one of those individuals to be in an instance where they became an exposure, bless you, in relation to work, and then they not have enough leave time to cover that. They could easily be wiped out, within the first 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Now, this leave only affects if it's contract traced to the school or school setting, correct?
Yes, sir.
Not community, just school.
Yeah.
Correct.
And they've changed the manner in which people go out now. So before it would be, if I, have COVID and I've been sitting next to Ms. Benjamin here, we've been here longer than 15 minutes. And so she automatically would quarantine. But now there's this other layer that says, there's more questions. It says, okay, Ms. Benjamin, have you been vaccinated? So if she says yes, then the next question would be, are you having any symptoms? If she says no, she doesn't have to go out to be quarantined. So there are it's a little different now than it used to be where it was automatic, but we just want to protect employees if we can for things are beyond their control. especially in a quarantine situation.
Yes.
So do we need a motion?
Yes,
Yes.
I would need your approval, since this would be a paid
it
leave.
would be paid leave for them.
Madam Chair, I move that we accept the motion as granted, as read.
It has been moved and second that we accept the report coming from Mrs. Branch on emergency leave regulations. All those in favor, use the usual sign.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Hearing no nays. Thank you, Mrs. Branch.
Thank you.
Dr. Weston?
Do you want to ask if there's any public comment? You can put the sheet.
Yeah, ask for it. Any comments?
This is our first time doing the work session like this, right? So we didn't put the sheet out, but we just wanted to provide an opportunity. We saw we have some nice faces here tonight that we don't normally see. So if there's somebody who would like to speak, okay, I want to provide the opportunity to, yeah. I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but I just,
I did have some questions.
yeah, we'd be happy to listen to you. Normally we do put the sheet out, and this is our first time doing a work session, so forgive us. Blame it on the head, not the heart.
That's the first time I've actually been in the meeting.
Well, welcome. We hope it won't be your last
I
time.
watched it on the YouTube,
Okay.
and I wasn't sure if I could actually come, so I decided
Sure.
to just show up and.
Well, we're
Here I
glad you're here.
Always welcome.
Thank you.
Sure.
State your name, please,
Uh,
and your address.
Jason Langinus, my address.
Well, you in the district.
Because you have to
You-
live
Oh,
in the
I'm
district.
27.
Get with it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, 27606 Perkins and Dinwiddie. I had some questions about the masking mandates for the schools. I understand that it's part of the state, but I've got a kindergarten coming in next year, and I'm really excited about him going. My first grader is going into second, and I've talked to him, and he doesn't mind, so I'm not worried about him. But my kindergartner, he never did. He doesn't want to do it, and I don't want to force him and go through all that fiasco. And I don't feel that it's good for a, young child to do that anyway. And I was wondering if there's what steps I could do to see if there was a way around it or other options for parents.
Well, I normally,
Yeah.
I would say that, what you heard tonight, or that we have a medical, option for kids. I will tell you, and I'm not sure what school your child's going to be going to, but I looked at our kindergarten numbers today, and the class sizes are very, very small. And I know that the teachers are working very hard to make it so that they will not be wearing masks for 8 hours a day. So it'll be wear a mask, we go outside, so it's not like that. So I think the options at this point might be working maybe with your pediatrician to say, this is what we're dealing with right now, and having that person help you with that. And then, after you meet the teacher and kind of get the lay of the classroom and see that it's maybe not going to be a 7-hour day wearing of a mask, especially with kindergartners who have never had an experience in a school setting before. The class sizes, I know some of them were at 13 and 15 kids, which is very, very small. But I mean, that's where we're at this moment. Those are the two options that you might have, you might see when he gets there and he sees the other kids wearing, he might say, hey, I might wear a mask. This is kind of not a bad thing to do, but we're very hopeful that this is going to be a short-term mitigation strategy that we have to employ, because that we were really moving in a very different direction 2 weeks ago. We were making them optional for families is what we were recommending until the order came out. And so we're very, very hopeful that we can get on the other side of this so we can get back to the optional. But I think right now, with us being we're at a very high transmission rate and not knowing what we don't know, and certainly there are people that are going to abide by the law. That's the only option that we have right now but I'm happy to come and sit down with your child, and we can walk through it and try to figure out, or get a really cool mask that is it a he?
Yeah,
We can get him a really cool mask, and maybe that'll be the
that's what we did to the older one last
we'll
year.
figure it out, It's,
We can
but I
offer
do
it. We
understand the apprehension and, of a 5-year-old, especially with this being the first experience. But I will tell you, the kindergarten teachers are ready to make it a really neat experience for the young people.
Okay.
And maybe we could offer him the forms in
Well,
case he
that's
chose.
what I'm saying, that
We'll get
if you wanted
give
to talk to your
those.
pediatrician, about what, here's what his worries are, and
Right.
and work with your pediatrician, that's another option as well.
Okay.
Because medical documentation comes in all different kinds of forms, so, not knowing your particular situation, that might be another thing you want to discuss with them.
Right. Okay. Would those be made available online or?
Yeah, are we ready now? Yeah, we're ready to go with them.
As soon as I can get the webmaster to put
As soon as we
them
can
on
get
there.
yes, so we'll be right online, and and we don't even mind making you a copy. You can have my. Oh no, I think I might have read on
Well,
mine.
we will provide them to each school.
I wrote on mine what I was going
I
to
can email
Here's
them to
mine.
each
You
school.
may have my copy. I did not write on mine, so here you get it fresh off the press.
Actually, I really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll make them available to each
Yeah.
school so they can, whatever's easiest for people to get them.
Yeah. But I would say, all the elementary principals are here this evening too. I would say, to connect with them, they're all wonderful about understanding when children have anxiety about things like that, and they're all parents, and they certainly can help you navigate that as well. I think you might be surprised.
Oh, you
It's
said
just
they're
a
all.
fear. They're all here right now. All the elementary principals are here right now. So look, they're all
Oh.
there.
Okay. I didn't recognize.
So I don't know which school. Which,
Dinwiddie Elementary.
Dinwiddie
He's right
Elementary School.
behind
He's
you.
right there, There he is,
I
Mr.
didn't-
Roberts. And Mr.
I didn't
Rob-
even recognize
And
him
actually,
back
his
there.
class sizes are around 13. He's got some very small class sizes in kindergarten over there. He's trying to keep it a secret.
I
But
see.
we all know how small they are. Yes, so he could work with you and work with the teachers to kind of help, ease that anxiety with the mask.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you.
And
Absolutely.
thank you for coming in.
Yeah.
Thanks for.
Come back
And
to
we're going
see
to
Let me
take
come
really
up.
good care of them. I promise you.
Yeah, they took care of my older one last year. So
Okay, great. Well, there you go.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, Mr. Roberts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Ask any of the other people.
Yeah.
Home
The
people.
rest are family.
I'm
That's it, I
ready
think.
to have
It's just adjournment,
Yes. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Madam Chair, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
It's moved and second that we adjourn. Thank you for coming. Have a good evening and a good weekend.
Mr. Roberts is going to talk to you now.